So, dudes, I want to talk about visual design in games, and I'm gonna compare Battlefield 1 to the atrocity that I have seen that is called Call of Duty Vanguard. Battlefield 1 is a World War I thematically inspired game. Now, there are a lot of aspects about this game that don't really have much to do with World War I at all. People run around and run and gun with semi-automatic weapons and automatic weapons, depending on the class you play. However, despite this, I still believe Battlefield 1 is a very good example of effective visual design, particularly in terms of gunplay, and also the way that they constructed mechanics around this unique setting. Pretty good examples of some of the unique guns that they've done. There's a lot of construction going on across the street from me. I can't really help it. Pretty interesting example to me is this Rsc Smg factory. This gun has 9 bullets. 9 bullets. It has a really big fucking muzzle brake on the front. It has a really slow rate of fire. And a big chunky looking magazine that's hollow. Presumably, at the time that this gun was designed, I'm assuming to make it lighter and easier to handle. So, with all of these factors in mind, this gun has a pretty quick T to K, and that's kind of the advantage in using it. It has a pretty quick T to K. You can probably win 1 or 2, maybe 2 gunfights, and that's kind of it. The setting also allowed the developers to make do with lots of interesting and really cool vehicle designs, like this big armored train, something that you probably wouldn't see in any modern FPS. It has this really menacing and commanding presence on the battlefield whenever it arrives. It's hard to take down. It makes a lot of noise. It has tons of big fucking guns on it. I'm gonna kill with this gun. Show you the T2K real quick. Yeah, as you can see, maybe 1 or 2 gunfights. But that's a deliberate design choice they made, you know? They have this gun that has a really, really small magazine. And it works, thematically speaking, because World War I was a time period where engineers were just now discovering, like, how to create automatic weapons. And most of your automatic weapons that had really big magazines and fired rifle-sized rounds were really big and not capable of being used by just one infantryman alone. They had to be in some kind of mounted position because they were too freaking heavy. The parts involved in making these large rifle rounds fire at a fully automatic rate made the gun too heavy for just one infantryman to carry around. Now, obviously, in the game, because it's a video game, we have a lot of different guns that you have to be able to carry around. But something else that's really interesting about a lot of the gun designs in this game is that they've taken a lot of guns that were historically dog shit, like the Shosha, which had a tendency to jam a lot. And they've actually made it into something that is a lot cooler than how it existed in reality. It has this kind of weight and this presence on the battlefield that demands your attention, right? It's this big, bulky piece of metal, and it fires really, really slowly, but each round does a pretty decent amount of damage. And, you know, if you get caught off guard by this thing, you better get out of the way. They made, like, a lot of these dog shit and weird guns into interesting visual set pieces for a game setting that not a lot of people, especially AAA studios, have ever really explored. And I always thought that was kind of interesting and really neat. You also got to see a lot of different guns in terms of different rounds that they fired from this time period. We didn't have standardized rounds yet. Individual countries would just kind of come up with individual proprietary ammunition that only their armies could really field, like this Carcano. This is a more typical design of a bolt-action rifle of the time, but you can see from the full reload here, those kind of rounded sort of bullets that you wouldn't normally see in another kind of game like this. So it combines a lot of different elements, right? We have like more conventional looking designs, but we also have a lot of interesting what-if sort of designs too, because again, like I said, engineers were figuring out how to make automatic weapons for the first time here. So that invited a lot of experimentation and a lot of really unique and interesting looking designs that you're not going to find in other FPS games like this Howl automatic factory. this is a semi-automatic rifle, which was very rare for the time period. And it has this really big, clunky kind of mechanism that it uses to cycle rounds. And it obviously has a lot of different moving parts to it. And it's making this, at the time, unorthodox sort of engineering approach here work. Albeit with a lot of moving parts and a lot of mechanics involved. Now, it's a video game, and, you know, we need to give some people something, right? We need to give them some kind of scopes. But the scopes still kind of look like something that you would find out of this time period, even if this sort of thing was really uncommon. This SMG I'm holding is more of the exception than the norm. For the most part, you have to aim with iron sights in this game. You've also got this really old French machine gun here, too, with a magazine that goes in the top, and then it feeds side to side. So you can literally see the action, you can literally see the mechanism work as the gun fires, and it also serves as a visual indicator of how much ammunition you have. There's lots of levers and cranks and really weighted, kind of antiquated looking sort of actions that the operator has to go through. You really get the sense that there are lots of different moving parts, and there's a certain degree of competency that the soldier has to have in order to operate these old contraption-looking guns. And if you want to roleplay a little bit, of course, you can also just use a conventional bolt-action rifle with iron sights on it. It's actually a pretty fun way to play the game. Now, this probably isn't the most effective way to play the game, but it's still pretty fun, in my opinion. And if you hit the head, it's a one-shot kill, so. The environments are really well detailed. The uniform design for the soldiers is really well done, too. It looks self-aware. That's a great way to describe Battlefield 1. It's obviously a video game, and it takes some creative liberties to make the sandbox fun and not super boring. But it's also self-aware, and it takes itself seriously to an extent. You know, it's obviously not a super realistic World War I game, but if I think of it almost like an alternate history kind of game, where the technology is just a little bit more developed and widespread, then yeah, you know, I can see it, and I like shit like that. It's unique, it's interesting, it's stuff that hasn't really been done before. And Battlefield 1 still has pretty active populations right now for the servers, despite Battlefield 5 being out for a considerable amount of time at this rate.
Enemy medic sighted. I need ammo now.
It's really fun. The bolt actions in this game are really, really fun. They also created an interesting dynamic with the gas grenades mechanic. So you have these gas grenades that do damage over time if you're caught in the vicinity of them, but everybody has a gas mask, and you can only hip fire. So if you're up close and personal with a gun that has really good hip fire, that sort of thing doesn't really matter. However, you know, it creates pressure in an environment that's really powerful, but it's not fucking overpowered, right? Like there's a counterplay mechanic involved. And it just creates another interesting dynamic to the sandbox. Now, what the fuck is going on with CoD Vanguard? Well, for one, they're doing the new thing that every fucking AAA shooter apparently has to do because Chart Guy and Suit Guy went to an Ivy League school and got a business degree, and they said, well, the market's really going for hero shooters, so I'm gonna make all these decisions even though I don't play games, and I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. So we're not gonna have factions in this game. And lo and behold, we're in a fucking World War II game, one of the most polarizing, politically involved conflicts in modern history, and we can't have uniforms to distinguish one army from the other, because that would take away from the hero shooter aspect of it. And we want the game to have unique characters that you can get behind, like Joe Gun. It would appear that the Thompson comes by default with the 50-round drum. The standard issue Thompson for American infantrymen came with a box magazine that resembled like a rectangular shape. So that's just weird. There is an entire category in this World War II game dedicated to assault rifles. Dedicated to assault rifles. Of course, anybody that knows anything about military history knows that the only widespread quote-unquote assault rifle was the STG-44, which didn't come into issue until around the end of 1943. many years into the war. And the bar is considered an assault rifle in this category. Which just I don't even... No words. No words for that. And the M1 Garand is considered a marksman rifle. Whatever the heck that is supposed to be in the context of a World War II game. Now, I understand that this is a video game, and conventional labels about guns in FPS games require us to a certain extent to use these terms incorrectly from a military terminology point of view, and perhaps somewhat more accurately in terms of a video game. But what the heck is going on? I just don't, like, this is a World War II game. This is the one exception we can make, right? We can do that, right? People aren't that unaware, right? Check out this M1 Garand with the drum magazine. This is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. I really just have no words. I don't. What is the point? What is the point in doing a historic setting for an FPS game if you're not going to try to mix it up a little bit and do different mechanics and different conventions, especially with the gunplay? Because it's not like we can't do it. We've already done it with World at War. We didn't have a lot of fully automatic, quote-unquote, assault rifles in World at War. Most of the rifles that fit under that category of being able to fight from short-ish to medium to long range were semi-automatic guns. We could go a step further and say, well, they were still using bolt-action rifles for the most part in World War II. The Americans were somewhat of an exception of having a mainline service rifle like the Garand that was semi-automatic. So what World at War did is that they had a lot of bolt actions that you could equip just with iron sights. And if you wanted to put a scope on it, you could. And then it became a quote-unquote sniper rifle. But it was really just a service rifle with a scope on it. We're so insistent on trying to make this game the same way that we had it with modern FPSs, like Warzone, that we're just completely ignoring the setting and just doing it for looks. So if we're only going for looks and it looks ridiculous, then what's the fucking point of doing it? Guess what kind of gun this is? It's a PPSH. This is a mastercraft you get for pre-ordering the game, apparently. So you got a Russian SMG with American Naval Air Force iconography on it, with like the blue and the vents here in the front with the shark head and the Naval Air Corps insignia on it, plus whatever the fuck this is supposed to be. It looks like Frankenstein's gun. It really, and then of course we have to have sights because normies can't. They have to have a modern looking sight on your World War II game or else they can't aim, which is not true. We've established that this is not true with plenty of other games, like Battlefield 1, the game that I just showed you. There were scopes, yeah, but there were a lot of guns that you could just run with iron sights perfectly fine. Oh, fuck. Oh, my God. Maybe it's time to stop doing this setting. Maybe it's time for big AAA companies to stop trying to do historical settings, because we evidently don't really give a fuck about what happened during this conflict that shaped the course of the 20th century and beyond. We don't really give a fuck about trying to make the setting interesting. We don't care about using this unique setting to create unique gameplay experiences. We'd rather just take what we already know, the conventions that we've already established with modern FPS games, and then just put a World War II coat of paint on it, but then we're not even going to do anything with it. What is the point? What is the freaking point? I'm just going to pass on this one. I think I'm going to pass on Call of Duty Vanguard. And I don't know if I trust AAA developers to really take anything with a historical setting anymore and do it correctly. I understand that these settings aren't really popular anymore because the general market likes to see things that are more modern and up-to-date because it feels a little bit more relatable, I guess. I don't know. I like this kind of stuff when it's done appropriately. If you're going to do shit like this, why even bother doing it at all?